All right. Wonderful. Well, let's see, we should look at our notes. I can do that. And welcome everyone. We will be discussing, as part of the Green Reviews Working Group, we'll discuss the pipeline design a bit more today to elaborate that part. Just grabbing the notes, sorry. And we didn't have an agenda for today, but we can go through questions. We definitely have questions.
Yeah, great. Should we start with the question? And then we can see when we can come up with an agenda as well. But I guess there are no questions.
Yeah, can we wrap up like what is the status, like what we need to do, where are the relevant documents and things like that? Because yeah, I went a bit off track. It might be helpful for everybody, maybe if someone would ever see this.
I think so. In terms of progress, we've mainly had some progress on the side of the cluster configuration, but just some discussions around what we need and what tools we could use. So like Ansible versus cluster API versus something else. Someone, I think Leo also brought up OpenTofu for Terraform's open source version. And then we had the progress about the Falco discussion the last meeting. As far as the pipeline design goes, I think we haven't made any progress past like design that we have. So we've talked about the GitHub actions and maybe having, well, we should definitely start with bootstrapping a GitHub action workflow file in the tag tooling repo. But then we need to decide exactly what the order of the steps will be. So where do we start from? Where do we want to get? Maybe let's talk about where we want to get, and then we'll just talk about where to start from, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to add something else also, since we've been discussing this together for some time?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think we're kind of making progress on the cluster, and I think deciding to just create the cluster manually for a start kind of unblocks us there. But I think you're kind of starting with the high-level design of the pipeline, and then just going maybe a bit more into detail how that kind of fits out. I think it'd be good to focus on the pipeline, and then also then we can just see how that affects the infrastructure that we need as well. But the pipeline itself, and then we've got like the high-level diagram that Max did, and there's an issue somewhere, on that. So maybe we have that as like a starting point.
Okay, and the main idea is still like that is around that document that once Max sketched, right? So sooner or later we should start writing this GitHub action file, which in the end deploys the servers and runs Kepler with Prometheus and Falco for the first, as a first step, right?
Yeah, exactly. I suggest that we go over the diagram and maybe we can talk through it together. I also tried, and then we can also try to write down a few notes. So we have a few sections in the design doc. We have the roadmap, we have the cluster side of things, and then there's this the pipeline. So we've talked about the GitHub action workflow. and how potentially could be triggered from another repo, like from the repo of the project itself. But we should talk about the GitHub action workflow itself. So maybe we can take this out and right. So I'm rewording this. The GitHub action workflow should execute the testing. Now, by testing, we mean the K6 tests or the benchmark tests, such as K6 tests, that we will be running in the infrastructure.
Yes, I think so, because I think it's just like going high level, probably, with the project, taking like Falco for an example, there'll be kind of situations when they want to execute the test workflow, like for example, they've made a new release and they want to see how it's doing it. So I guess we want their repo to kind of trigger the action, but then maybe I think is reusable workflows, I think is what it's called, that will then trigger an action like in our tooling repo. And then we can see, what are the kind of the steps within the tooling repo.
Yes. So this is kind of
because I think, for example, we don't want to run it on every commit, whether they're working with Falco. I think we wanted to keep it kind of high level, like when there's a new release, when there's something, kind of larger that we want to test.
Yeah, so I guess we could also start with a manual process and then of running the test, and at a later stage link that to be triggered by releases. I think it's good to have that goal for the future, but first we really should start with the manual like triggers, I think. Let me capture this. Do you agree? Because I'm also designing a workflow test at the moment for a project I'm working on. So that's also how we're doing it. We're just everything manual first, and when things are working, we can think about how we trigger this based on like a release cadence with something else.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
I think that makes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, my bad. You go first.
I was going to say, I definitely agree, kind of moving step by step. I think that's kind of the long-term goal, but if we can move step by step, and I think, starting off, with the manual trigger is good. And then maybe even for a start, we just install Falco manually as well, and we can just move like step by step, like as we work on the pipeline. Antonio?
Yeah, no, I wanted to say the same practically. So I was wondering if, from my perspective, so the first step would be trying to experiment installing Falco on a server. So like first bringing up the server, right, and then trying to install Kubernetes and then Falco, and like do this as a manual step, and then when we can like document what were our our instructions that we followed, and then go forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
From-
I think that's good. And also we even talked a bit about we might want to measure kind of the idling load for a start. So maybe we could also kind of even start there when we get to that point, because then we don't need like a test workload for a start. Because it's really what's the kind of smallest step we can take that's still useful.
I guess the smallest step, what is the smallest next step? I think a workflow. So if we can write a K6 test of workload, like we need to deploy a workload on the cluster. So this workload could be any demobile workload. We then have like a make file, like a make step that runs, make test Falco. And then we hook that in the pipeline. So in the GitHub Action workflow, I think the workflow actually is the one doing all of these things. Now that I think about it, so we can basically list this. So we want to deploy workflow, deploy Falco, deploy workflow, run the benchmark EG K6 test to run yeah, those are the first few steps that I'm imagining. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like deploying Kubernetes or like installing Kubernetes first, like step 0, or like with Equinix comes installed.
I think for that we can use the docs PR did where we create the cluster manually, and that'll give us Kubernetes there installed, and then we can kind of work out later how we want to kind of automate that. But I think we can have like an Equinix cluster with a couple of nodes, and Kubernetes will be there. So I think starting with deploying Falco, I think would be a good step.
All right. Then like what do you mean by deploy a workflow? What that would be? Breaking into workload.
That workload.
Right, because we need to simulate a production environment kind of scenario. Yeah, like I sent this link in the chat. I think that's what they were like. Also, Melissa was mentioning they use at Falco. I've never used it, like this GCP microservices demo, and this, like they said, like would have been good enough. So I don't know if it is a good starting point.
That sounds good.
Sorry,
yeah. Worse.
I was going to say, I think that sounds good. As a workload, I've heard of that one, but I haven't used it. I used the old socks shop, which I think was the Weave one that they had like years ago. So I remember doing that, and I think having this kind of example workloads are useful.
Yeah, the sock shop from Weaveworks was also quite common, but it's not maintained anymore, unfortunately. So we can't use that anymore. But this looks really good, and it looks there was just a commit less than an hour ago. I think that's a good sign. And tests are passing. And if Melissa recommended it, I think that's really, really a good sign. So we would, okay, this quick start is for GKE. But we would essentially just clone the repo and K apply it. Cool. There's a release that you can just apply, so that's nice. Pretty straightforward. So we need some endpoints that we can use.
Is that where K6 could come in? Could we write kind of a, like a simple K6 test that calls the endpoints in?
Yeah, that's how, yeah, exactly. That calls, so, or next step is essentially to write the K6 test that works with the demo. I think that's a like an actionable next step.
From the architecture, I see that there is already a load generator, so I don't know if it's necessary to so I don't know if this demo already like calls some internally some of the endpoints. Maybe.
Let's and also we need some service that writes a lot. So I don't know if they have anything like that.
I was trying to check the logs.
There's a load generator.
Yeah, they have using locust. I've used locust a little bit in the past.
Yeah, it's doing posts, right? So maybe executing this will be enough for K6.
Yes, I think if there's a way that we can run that as part of the pipeline, that would be a good first step.
Maybe we can create a pipeline that runs the workload in the cluster. That's also a next step. Let me write those down. We could use Flux for this. I mean, so that we can have Flux with cluster API. And also we're still then using GitOps, so we can just have a PR that triggers things.
Yes, I think if we could use Flux then, because I think using GitOps for what we run like inside the cluster will be easier than doing GitOps for the cluster itself. And if we can just manage that cluster and then deploy everything, I think that automation will be useful.
Nice, yeah. I'm writing this as we would write tickets. So it's actually like the tickets that correspond to the steps that we wrote before. So if we create a GitHub Actions step that triggers the workload endpoint, this could already just be we can start with a curl request or with curl to make the request or something very simple before we expand this into a K6 kind of load test, I think.
Did you get if the microservice demo already like runs the load generator, like if you have to trigger it manually? From the docs, it seems that like when you install it, like this load generator says continuously sends requests imitating release to user shopping. But then I was taking a look at the code. I don't know, there is like one between 1 and 10. Like, so I don't know, it seems like a user does a call every 10 seconds. Maybe we need to do it faster or like more often. I don't know this part. So if you click the load generator last row, then it brings you to the code. But I'm not the best Pythoneer. Like if you, I think like these are all functions, and then at the bottom there is like one class. Yeah, it's user behavior test.
So it adds things to so the client is doing this post request to add things to the cart. Oh, this is add to cart. This is the post. Okay. Add to cart. It randomly chooses one of the products here. It gets the product. So it makes a call to the product thing. And then it posts this to the cart. This is good. But I feel like there was another one. Let's see, like it's good to have an overview of what else there is. This one was interesting. One, because it makes an external request. So what Melissa said was that we want a lot of networking or a lot of IO, like logs would be nice, logging. Or writing to file, like the file system. Yeah, I'm also not exactly sure how how the syscalls affect Falco, but I'm just trying to remember what Melissa suggested. We could also ask Melissa directly in the new issue that they've opened, like which of these services would they recommend for us to use? That would be the best way to test Falco. What do you think?
Yeah, that could be an option. I have also some requirements because then like Melissa introduced me to some of the maintainers of Falco because yeah, they're Italian, and then she thought it was nice to like network and stuff, and then they started saying something. So I can copy paste this. So this was a message from one of them, and from some of the requirement on the CPU. Wait, I don't know. I'll just copy paste it here, and then like you tell me if it is the right place or not. What are we writing? access control, GitHub action workflow, blah blah blah. Here, copy paste here. But I must say I don't fully understand what's written there. And then another thing, and then like they suggested this Google Cloud platform demo. And then it says like something I remember it should have a synthetic load generator, but it didn't say anything else. And like it said, like it should be a good way to test it because it was microservice based. And then in addition, this was the addition of Melissa in the chat. So those look like very hard, not hardcore, but like very technical system expert requirements. I was not really able to understand how to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's very useful, especially because they've already looked at the microservices demo. I'm sort of remembering from Locust, there's ways of kind of doing kind of how many iterations you kind of the concurrency have you actually configure Locust. But maybe we could just start with the default kind of load generator there and see how it runs, and then start moving in this direction because they've got these kind of hard requirements that they think would work. But I think it's a good, it's a good direction to look further into.
Do you have, Antonio, a link to this comment that we can add in the documents?
They were in a Slack chat, so I can, yeah.
Right.
So it was not the best practice for transparency, but yeah, I think that's why we are trying to report this here.
Okay. Yeah, because also I wanted to like credit it, but give credit.
All right, so like, yes, the first message with the O35 and O36 was from, I can write the name in the chat. Oh no, I can copy paste directly, no need. Wait. This was written by Andrea Terzolo, and the rest was written by Benissa. No, wrong. This was Federico Di Piero. Wait. This was Benissa. So those two messages were sent by those two people. But I do agree with Ross. This might come like as a next step, like later in the process.
I think
But
so.
Since, yeah, since we were talking about, I don't know what is the best to run, and then like I think they I remember they set some requirements. I'm not even sure what kind of tooling could get us to gather these metrics. Maybe Prometheus, does Prometheus expose kernel event rate? I don't know.
Does Prometheus have? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I was just thinking out loud, but yeah, I don't even know how to get this metrics. So, like for example, kernel event rate being from 200K and 500K to 1.2 million. Like I wouldn't know how to measure it. Like does Prometheus measure this?
Out of the box. So we would need some kind of I don't know. The kernel event rate. Yeah, that's a good point. Let me just arrange things in the doc. For example, see the Falco load test suggestions. I think we should move this to the Falco. The okay. I think we want to creating the load test is good, but we also want to just run. I would really like to be able to use Kepler for as a way to measure the energy consumption under this load. So like what it's good to see that the kernel event rate is high to ensure that Falco is under a lot of load, which is going to show us that what we're trying to do is working. Before we get there, though, we can also just get some good metrics when Falco is idle. So I think that I'm only raising this because measuring the idle state of Falco will happen more easily when once we've deployed Falco on the cluster, and it's some immediate results that we can already use. At least with like the Flux and Argo CD tests, this is what we did. First, we didn't run any workloads, and the first test was just like Flux and Argo CD idle. And then, so that was test 0, and then we had test 1, which was like the reconciliation, which is the functional units. And does that make sense? So we want to have.
Yeah, like the problem is, if I got it correctly, that Falco without any workload won't do much, right? Like because it's not an ordinary app. So I think in general it's a good idea to like make some benchmark between like offload and with some load. But I don't know if we would be able to measure anything when nothing is running on the cluster, or we should come up with some synthetic load which is not null, but yeah, like stressing a little bit the cluster, like not a proper GCP mini cloud, how is it called, microservice demo, but maybe something smaller.
Yeah, okay. It's good to capture it in the design doc. anyway, because then we know for the next CNCF project that, hey, we're going to first do test 0, which is idle state, and then test 1 will be the load test. So now we have like a clear map or roadmap. Okay, we went a little bit on the down this road, which is good. I'm wondering if, you know, the last question I think we have is, how do we measure the kernel event rate, right?
Yes, I was just looking at, I couldn't see that specific metric, but Falco do have an exporter. So I'm wondering whether they have like a Prometheus exporter that exposes those that we could use. Might be, another question, for the Falco team to see, would they recommend us also having the exporter running in the cluster? I just put the link in the chat.
Yeah, we can also ask them directly, like, since, I mean, they proposed, like they suggested a rate to check. For sure, they know how to check it.
Yes, yeah.
Are you okay to take this, either of you? Who would like to ask? Yeah.
Yeah, I can ask them.
And then you can add this under this, in this section, like, how do we measure the kernel event rate?
Sure.
My process has been like, as we add things to the Falco section, in the end there's questions, and we had some questions before, but they were answered, so I removed them and just changed this with the newest question. So it's, yeah.
Sure.
Cool.
Self-growing.
There's always more questions. Before we move ahead, I'm wondering if we could take a look again at the diagram and see oh, there's also the Falco exporter. Yes.
I think on the workflow steps, deploy Kepler also is missing, right? Like as a step.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if we just have Kepler, deployed all the time, and that could be one of the things with Flux. So with Flux, we manage kind of which version of Kepler we're running.
If Flux could be used, sorry.
So I was wondering if Flux could be used to to deploy Kepler, and whether we just leave Kepler just running there, and then we scrape the metrics up from the pipeline. I'm not sure whether that step needs to be in the pipeline. The install of Kepler.
Yes. Yep. That's how so in my test, I was using Flux to deploy Kepler and then Kepler to measure Flux. It works. Antonio, I don't have your email here.
Send in the chat. Is the chat saved somewhere? I don't mind too much, but
Maybe. Awesome. Okay. Anything
then I was wondering, like, shall we arrange like sessions, or like, since I understood correctly, Ross, we don't have access yet to the Equinix cluster, right? Like, but if we would like to start testing the installation of Falco, or like, I don't know, split the work in 2 tickets. One tries to install Falco, one tries to install Kepler, and so on. How is this next steps going to be like?
So yeah, we've got the docs for how to create the cluster. But I think Nikki, probably it would be your Christina will need to follow the steps to actually run them because you've got access because it needs access to their Equinix console. I think the problem is because they haven't got SSO or anything, getting access to their Equinix console is quite a problem, I think. But what I was wondering was whether we could create the cluster and then you could share maybe the kube config or like put our SSH keys on and do the authentication that way.
Yeah. So the idea would be that we just need to add the API keys of the Equinix side of things with the repo, and then we use Flux and Cluster API for everything. So we just use a GitOps approach. So then we don't need to share more access with people if we do the authentication with it. But I haven't, yeah, I have to see. I don't know exactly how. I've never done this before, so I have to take some time to do that. So, but then hopefully we do everything through GitOps. Otherwise, we can also discuss the idea of having additional roles or something like that, so that we can have more, give more access. I would be in favor of doing that. I don't know what the roles would be like. I think Leo would be the one to ask because currently, whatever the Green Reviews working group has in terms of like structure and roles, they are the tag. It has to go through the tag. So I think we should do both. One, definitely have GitOps, like a GitOps repo so people can make changes through the repo. However, then the issue is that like, how do you have feedback that things are working?
Yeah. I mean, maybe just sharing the kube config can work, so you don't need access to the cluster, but you to the server itself, but you can get access to the cluster. I think that would be already a big, like would be already helpful. Like for example, I've never deployed Flux, so if I had to do it, I would probably go first with some manual step, and then I would be better or like easier to have access to the server. No, maybe no, actually. All we need is the cluster access, right? Kubernetes cluster access. Then we are kind of autonomous.
Yeah. This is a great idea. It's so obvious. Yeah, we can share the kube config once the cluster is up and running. The okay, Equinix. Awesome. Okay, so we have three types of access.
So do we need to create separate key tickets issues for asking for repository access and cluster access? Maybe we can do that. And then once we have access, we can, I don't know, try to experiment the installation of Flux and Falco and Kepler, right? So we can split one each.
Yeah. So we need to, so like what's blocking us is that someone who has access to Equinix needs to hook up the repository with the API key, like the public key of the Equinix stuff. Then from the repo, we can create the cluster, and then I can share a kubeconfig with you, and then you can deploy things to the cluster. Is that okay? I will have to do it very soon then, because I don't want to block. But it's I'll have to see.
Yeah, no stress. I mean, like when you have time.
A little bit of stress. No stress. What is that? What do you mean? I am very stressed. I mean, there's a with KubeCon and everything. It's 2 weeks away, 2.5 weeks. So
Are you
I'll
presenting?
Yeah, I'm doing
Big time.
yeah, 3 things.
Wow. Because one, it's not enough.
I don't know how it happens that somehow I say yes to things and then I'm like, it's a lot of things. Let's
You'll do it.
see.
You'll do it. No
Yeah,
worries.
got it. I mean, last KubeCon NA I did 3 talks, but they needed a lot of preparation. This time it feels like it's a lot of preparation but less technical work, because this time last year for KubeCon NA last year it was the first time that I ran Kepler on Equinix, and it was the time also when I was trying to do the GitHub Actions, like on self-hosted runners on Equinix, and that failed completely. So there was like a lot of trial and error this time last year, which was like when you have a presentation which is mainly talking, like presenting something like what the tag does, that's okay. That's you can kind of you need less preparations, but if you're doing a lot of trial and error work, it's
that was repair.
it's a lot of
Sure. With the pressure of like what I'm going to present if it's only error. No trials.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, do we have deadline for, because I've read somewhere in the document that Leonard expects something before the KubeCon NA, and this was scaring me because like it's in 2 weeks. So I actually wrote a comment 5 minutes before the call because it was proposing something like manual cloud-native sustainability footprint measuring up until KubeCon NA, but I think that's not reasonable, right?
Yeah, I think it's too much. Definitely we're doing this. We have a draft. I don't know if we will have everything that we said to make this happen. So like let's recap. So so a tag lead, this is actually an ordered list. Tag lead creates API keys, and adds these to the tooling repository. Cluster configuration, add cluster configuration to the repository until it works. And then share kubeconfig with working group contributors.
Yeah, although if we're going to create the cluster manually, while we're kind of prototyping things, then I think we wouldn't need the cluster config in the repository straight away. We would just need an API key. We could, that will create the cluster, and then it's in the Docker project, it's using kind for the management cluster, and you can just use that to get the kubeconfig. So that will be a way of creating the cluster, but without doing the full GitOps part. Because I think the part that's hard with the full GitOps part is the infrastructure as code part, where we actually provision the cluster. Because do we use CAPI, do we use kubeadm, that part? But if we can create the cluster manually, then we can have a kubeconfig, we can have a cluster running that we can work with.
In this case, the management cluster, the kind cluster would be on the Equinix infrastructure?
No, it'd be on your local machine.
Right. So we have a kind cluster locally, and what would you need? Would need the API keys for for the worker clusters to run on Equinix? Or
Yes, yeah, it just needs an Equinix API key, and you set that as an environment variable, and then the CAPI controllers use it. So it's just really creating the key, creating the API key in the console. But then the kind cluster, the controllers will do all the cluster creation.
okay.
It's amazing. I didn't know you could create a cluster remotely with kind.
Yes, it's great. It's great for testing things out. The problem is if you want to do upgrades later, because if you haven't got the kind cluster anymore, it's not like a full management cluster. But I think for prototyping, like we're doing, we can create the cluster, and even if we can delete it and start from scratch, that will get us going, and then later we can have the fork to get it as well.
Okay, so initial testing is this, and then infrastructure as code is this. Is this correct?
Yes, yeah.
And then that would actually be here.
Unless we want to share the kubeconfig on the initial cluster so we can kind of try it, installing Flux and just try it installing Flux.
Yeah, so one person would have kind locally and create management cluster on their computer with an API key. Then they can create a worker cluster on Equinix, and they can share the kubeconfig with another person if they want to use the same cluster, so that we don't start over every time. That sounds right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
API keys 0.1 are API keys for Kubernetes cluster or for what?
I think it's the
1.8. It's the Equinix public key. Okay.
Yeah.
And with the local kind cluster, you can create a worker node on the Equinix. But who's gonna create the master on Equinix?
It'll create both. It'll create a control plane and a worker node. So then it's a full cluster. It's just we haven't got a proper we haven't got a long-lived management cluster, so it's hard to do upgrades later. But it'll be like a full cluster with 2 nodes.
Okay.
Would someone like to volunteer to write a summary in the design issue, please? Because we have.
So I
I'm
can take that. Are you thinking the issue in the ribbon here on bootstrapping the cluster? Or is
sorry.
it a different issue? I just I'm happy to to write a summary, but I just wasn't sure which issue you were kind of referring to.
I think we can use the main design issue for now. I was considering whether we want to create any more new issues, but I think
I think it's worth it to like, can we create milestones and like maybe like do this like as a first milestone, like measure something manual as Leonard described, and then we can create everything as an issue. So I would like step by step, I don't know, every point that you put there as a separate issue, with an action tracking, like action label. So I feel like otherwise it might be too much for you to do and not well represented how much you're doing. Like, I don't know, but it would be, I think, also easier for you to handle. But it's also a lot of work creating all of those issues. So I don't know, there is a bit of trade-off. But maybe, I don't know, also someone else could help you doing some of the issues. You don't have to do everything on your own.
yeah, I think it's a really good idea to. Okay, I think we can create a milestone. I don't know how.
We can call it something like manual Falco measuring, or
Yeah, or I think the idea someone said we can make milestones out of each of these. So workflow draft could be the first milestone, and I think it does mean completing this. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your suggestion.
no, it's me that didn't have enough overview. Okay, so like, yes, this can be, these are all the actions related to the because like some of those are not actionable, right? Like some of are just tracking. So then we can either define this as a milestone and then like include a lot of more tickets within this. I don't know how milestone work in GitHub. I use them in GitLab, but it's usually just a like grouper for many issues together, right?
Yeah, and I didn't see, like, it didn't let me create a new milestone here. So I'm wondering if it's like I don't have access to do that.
Maybe.
No, I should have, if I can see settings.
Would have to click on settings, right to milestone.
No, I don't have that many permissions actually. Oh.
looks like you cannot create milestones, right? Or if we click new issue.
New milestone. Okay.
Sorry.
So we want to have a draft.
Because we just did the draft, right? Like we don't need to do anything else, or then
Yeah,
we just need to do all the practical things. Like then would have a milestone and then one of the things to do. But I don't know. It's just way I have understood things in my mind. Maybe I'm missing something.
so we would create a milestone for this basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep.
And then maybe we can write the summary and the description of the milestone itself.
Yeah.
And share that on the working group.
Sounds good. I don't think that we will have this up until KubeCon, and but it could be more this basically.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because there's still quite a lot of things we need to figure out. To have a good one, I think it's probably just saying.
Yep. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
like I'm putting okay. So goals include draft of the implementation. I'm just adding this under this milestone. I think it's good to have everything together, or maybe it's too broad.
I would just focus on, the manual steps that we need to have basically a first version of like we can measure something manually, right? Like we measure, like we arrive to a point in which like we have our metrics on Kepler and that's it, like as an end goal. Then we put there all the tickets that we need to do to achieve this. Of course, then we can continue documenting what we do in the design doc. But I think it's more of a cycle, right? Like we try something, we document it, then we try again. But the end goal would be to have some measures on the cluster, if I understood correctly. I would add maybe 3, the metrics in Kepler, like some data in Kepler.
Yep.
think that's good. I'm just wondering whether we should have manual in the title somehow, just to, because people might not click through to the description.
So sorry, that
Yeah, so we just wasn't sure whether we should have manual in the title somewhere as well.
You can append manually at the end, right? Like measure the cloud sustainability footprint of first code manually.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that was good proposal.
Yep. I agree with focusing on doing everything end to end manually first, and we can add automation later, like when we have things working manually.
Sounds great.
So I think that'll make it faster to inspect. That's good.
Okay. I don't like due dates and deadlines. I'm very agile. The work is happening. And we have a loose goal of end of 23. Let's see if we can, get as much of it as possible by KubeCon. I'll share the API key of the Equinix from the Equinix console. I won't do that like now. I'll do this afterwards, and then I can share it privately. I'll double check with Leo and Christina, to let them know that we're doing that, and I think it's looking really good. And next steps, like we have a few things. This could be issues. I think we should make these next steps as issues, and these could be issues.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. And we could have the issues, in the tooling repo as well, like we started there as well. I think that can be useful just to see where everything is.
Yeah, in tooling repo. Yeah. Let me try. I can add some. I can create the issues. But we can already start as well if you want. Once I have the. Yeah, don't worry about it. Leave that with me. I'll do what I can to unblock the rest of the work.
So if I understood currently, once you're done with your work, we'll have a kube config, right? And then from there we can start to play around with the installation, right?
Yeah,
it works like this, or I've understood, or I misunderstood something. Because
yeah, so
I'm not sure I fully got the mechanics of these API keys and like how it works with Equinix. But yeah, maybe you can write something somewhere and then I will read it. No need to use any other time because we're 15 minutes late. So
yeah, okay. So this will be Ross who does this, I believe. I'll share the API key with Ross, and then Ross will take it from there. Do you want to explain more?
Yes, I can do that. The docs PI that I created, that has all the steps I'm going to run through, so you can see the steps there. And there's a step there for getting the config, and then I can share that. I can share that with you both once that's there. And yeah, just use the API key there. But yeah, I'm happy to create the question.
the docs that you're mentioning, is it already on the design document and I'm not seeing it, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, it was the pull request that I put in the channel in the tooling repo.
Okay, the pull request in the tooling repo. Yeah, and then that's my bad. There are so many points in the information. Could be that sometimes I lose myself. I still have to get myself familiar.
So let me just find it. Yeah, I just put it in chat.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and that just has the steps, for creating a cluster. I do put some questions in there for like which metro we want to use a location. But maybe also, if you have time, you could both have a look maybe asynchronously, and maybe actually we could get this PR approved before I run the steps to make sure that we're happy with the approach.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it was mainly around which metro to use, which is what they call region, and then the instance type. And yeah, I tried testing with an ARM machine and couldn't get it working. So I think, at least for a start, if we go for an Intel machine, I think that will just make things easier.
I agree. Yes, there's docs. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for the great work.
Yeah, this is
Run these
amazing.
few steps. So it's good to write them up. I run these few steps a few times. It's good just having it over.
Nice. All right. Well, we have, I hope this today clarified some of the things of what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll see you all next Wednesday at the working group meeting.
Yeah, if in the meanwhile you have some work that you can delegate, always happy to help out.
We've got the new. So we've got the new channels, so we can synchronize that as well.
Yeah, if you'd like to write an update, that would really help me a lot. So if you'd like to write an update in the issues or in the channel, that would be really great. So we can share some of this, and then I'll create the tickets.
I can write the update if you want on the channel, or what is the best place? Issue channel. I'm still confused.
The channel, I think. Well, the both. We're doing kind of both, but one.
Can we add something like a Slack bot that we write an issue and then like got spread in the channel? I don't know. There should be something like that. I've heard about it, at least at work.
There is, but I don't know if we would have permission to do that with a CNCF Slack. Or if it already. Yeah.
So the issue, which issue in case?
The main one.
So just a comment there, right?
Yeah. In this one. Or just in the channel. That's fine as well.
Is the issue somewhere? Or
sorry, let me send it to you. I need to drop. But we're doing good. We have progress.
And a good one seems related to books. Then I will write the summary and also take a read and comments with the documents that you Ross wrote for the pull request.
Oh, thanks, that's great.
Me too. I'll leave you
Okay
guys.
then.
Okay. All right. See you next week.
See you.
Bye.